11 years. That is how long I bought fish oil capsules. 4 bottles a year, roughly $40 each, shipped in temperature-controlled packaging to preserve something my body apparently needed, but could not make on its own. Omega-3 fatty acids. I swallowed 2 capsules every morning with breakfast, the way my doctor suggested, after a routine blood panel in my mid-40s. I never questioned the routine. Then, last February, I found a number in a research paper that made me put the bottle down and not pick it up again. 64%. That is the omega-3 concentration in the seed oil of a plant called perilla, the highest ever measured in any plant species on Earth. Higher than flax at 53%. Higher than chia at 58%. Higher than any fish oil capsule I had been buying for over a decade. The plant grows like a weed, self-seeds with a ferocity that borders on aggression, and 500 million people across Asia eat it every single week. I had never heard the word perilla in my life. That gap between how many people eat this plant and how few Westerners know it exists is the part that kept me reading past midnight. Walk into any Korean barbecue restaurant tonight. Watch the table next to yours. They will be wrapping grilled meat in large green leaves with serrated edges and purple undersides. That leaf is perilla. Koreans call it catnip. It is as common in Korean kitchens as basil is in Italian ones. In Japan, they call it shiso. Every piece of sashimi in the country is served with a perilla leaf beneath it. Most Western tourists think the leaf is decoration. It is not. The leaf contains compounds that kill bacteria and parasites. Japanese chefs have known this for 500 years. The garnish is medicine hiding in plain sight. In China, traditional apothecaries stock dried perilla for treating 40 different conditions. The documentation fills thousands of pages of texts that Western researchers never translated. Here is the detail that made me stop and reread twice. Basil, oregano, mint, rosemary, thyme. Every Western grocery store stocks those herbs. Perilla belongs to the same family, Lamiaceae, the mints. It is a cousin to every herb in the average spice rack. More people eat perilla daily than eat all those Western herbs combined. Yet it does not exist in the Western grocery consciousness. Most Americans have never heard the word. The reason starts with names. Koreans say catnip. Japanese say shiso. Chinese say zisu. Botanists say perilla frutescens. 4 names for one plant across 4 languages, and no single consistent identity in English. When a plant has no stable name, it has no stable presence in databases, cookbooks, or research funding. The fragmentation was not deliberate. The result was erasure. I taught plant taxonomy to high schoolers for years. I had a poster on my classroom wall with the Lamiaceae family tree. Basil, mint, oregano, rosemary, all labeled with their common names and Latin binomials. Perilla was on the poster. I know it was, because I went back to check after I read that 64% number. It was in the lower right corner, small print, no common name listed. I had looked at that poster every school day for 15 years. I had pointed at every other genus on it during lectures. I never once pointed at perilla. It was visible and invisible at the same time, like a student who sits in the back row and never raises a hand. You know they are there. You never call on them. That comparison bothers me more than I would like to admit. The ancient records tell a different story from the modern silence. In China, around 200 AD, scholars compiled the Shenong Bencao Jing, the oldest surviving pharmacopoeia in human history. Perilla appears in its pages, prescribed for respiratory illness and digestive trouble. 2,000 years ago, Chinese physicians understood what this plant could do. In Korea, a royal physician named Hyo-jun spent 15 years writing the Donggui Bogam, finishing in 1613. That encyclopedia documented 17 distinct uses for perilla, including treating coughs, calming nausea, reducing inflammation, and improving digestion. The book became Korea's most important medical text. It guided physicians for 4 centuries. Western scholars did not translate it until 1999. 386 years of medical knowledge, locked behind a language barrier. In Japan during the Edo period, 1603 to 1868, perilla cultivation reached 90% of farming households. Families grew it for food, medicine, and lamp oil. Before electricity, Japanese villages pressed oil from perilla seeds to light their homes. One crop served 3 purposes simultaneously: food on the table, medicine in the cabinet, light in the darkness. Read that detail standing in my kitchen and thought about all the things we now buy separately: cooking oil, supplements, essential oils, that one plant used to provide from a single harvest. The efficiency of it felt almost like a rebuke. The omega-3 science arrived much later. In 1991, researchers at the National Institute of Nutrition in India analyzed perilla seed oil and found alpha-linolenic acid concentrations between 54 and 64%. Alpha-linolenic acid is the plant-based form of omega-3. 64%. No other plant on Earth comes close. Flaxseed oil, which health food stores promote as a superfood, contains 53%. Chia oil, which they charge premium prices for, contains 58%. Perilla sits above both by a clear margin, and almost nobody in the Western world has heard of it. That asymmetry has an explanation, and it is not conspiracy. It is economics. In the 1970s, Danish researchers studying Inuit populations in Greenland noticed remarkably low rates of heart disease despite high-fat diets. They identified omega-3 fatty acids as the protective factor. Fish consumption became the explanation. Fish oil became the solution. By 1980, capsules hit the market. By 2024, the global omega-3 supplement industry reached $4 billion annually. Fish oil dominates that market. Krill oil occupies the premium segment. Algae oil serves the vegetarian niche. Every product requires industrial processing, extraction, purification, encapsulation, quality control, cold chain shipping. Complexity creates barriers to entry. Barriers protect profit margins. Now consider perilla. The seeds can be cold pressed with hand tools. No industrial facility required. No patents on pressing seeds. No capsule formula to protect. A farmer with a wooden press can produce omega-3 oil in a shed. A crop that self-seeds cannot generate repeat seed sales. A product requiring no processing cannot generate processing revenue. Perilla threatens every link in the supplement supply chain. I remember explaining supply chains to my economics-curious biology students, how each link adds cost, and how removing links reduces price, but also eliminates jobs and profits. I use the example of vitamin C in an orange versus vitamin C in a pill. The students always picked the orange. The answer was obvious. Perilla is the same obvious answer, except that most people have never been given the choice. Search PubMed today and type fish oil omega-3. Over 15,000 studies appear. Type perilla omega-3. 400. The ratio is 37:1. That ratio does not reflect which source works better. It reflects which source has funding. Research follows money. Money follows patents. Patents require control. Perilla cannot be controlled. It self-seeds. It spreads. It naturalizes. It becomes free. What cannot be owned cannot be sold, and what cannot be sold does not generate research budgets. I ordered seeds in early March. They arrived in a small paper envelope, about 200 seeds for $6. I started half of them indoors in cell trays under a grow light, 6 weeks before my last frost date, and direct seeded the other half into a raised bed after the soil warmed. The indoor starts germinated in 7 days. Tiny paired leaves, slightly purple tinted from the start. By mid-April, they were 3 inches tall and ready to transplant. I set them 12 inches apart in a bed that gets morning sun and afternoon dappled shade. They did not care about the spacing. By July, the plants were touching, leaves overlapping, creating their own canopy. The direct-seeded batch came up 10 days later than the transplants, slower but tougher. By August, both groups were indistinguishable. Here is my first mistake, and it is worth describing because I suspect others will make it too. I watered the transplants the way I water tomatoes, deeply, every few days. Perilla did not want that. The plants in the wetter section of the bed developed pale lower leaves and a slightly limp posture that I recognize from overwatered basil. I backed off to watering only when the top inch of soil felt dry, which in my climate meant roughly once a week after establishment. The direct-seeded plants, which I largely ignored, looked better than the pampered transplants all season. The lesson was familiar. The plant I managed least performed best. My garden teaches me that lesson about once a year, and I keep needing the reminder. By mid-June, the plants stood 2 feet tall, and the leaves were magnificent. Large, some the size of my palm, with deeply serrated edges and a color that shifted depending on the light. Green on top, purple underneath, and when a breeze turned the leaves, both colors rippled through the row like a living quilt. I picked a leaf, tore it in half, and held it to my nose. The smell was immediate and complex. A mix of mint and basil with something else underneath. A warm anise note that I had never encountered in any herb I had grown. I ate the torn half standing in the garden. The taste matched the smell, herbal, bright, slightly sweet, with a complexity that made grocery store basil seem one-dimensional. I understood in that moment why Korean families wrap meat in these leaves. The flavor does something that complements rich food the way a squeeze of lemon does, cutting through fat while adding its own layer. I brought a handful of leaves inside and looked up how Korean and Japanese cooks actually use them. The range surprised me. Fresh in salads, wrapped around grilled meat or rice, chopped into soups and stews, pickled in soy sauce and garlic, a Korean side dish called kakenip jangaji that I later made and that kept in the fridge for weeks. Tempura battered and fried, which is the Japanese preparation I liked best. Dried and crumbled into tea, which tasted like a gentler version of peppermint. Blended into pesto as a basil substitute, which worked better than I expected. I made the pesto on a Saturday afternoon in late July, using a recipe I found on a Korean food blog, translated by someone whose English was charmingly uneven. The instructions said to blend perilla leaves with garlic, pine nuts, salt, and a good olive oil, then taste and adjust for the soul. I adjusted for the soul. The result was deeper and more complex than any basil pesto I had made in 30 years of cooking. I had planted perilla for the omega-3 seeds. The leaves turned out to be the immediate reward. A culinary herb as versatile as basil, but with a depth of flavor that basil cannot match. The leaves also carried a nutritional profile I had not anticipated. 3.9 grams of protein per 100 grams fresh weight. More than spinach, more than kale. 230 milligrams of calcium. 5,520 international units of vitamin A. Significant iron content. Rosmarinic acid in concentrations higher than rosemary itself, despite the name. A Japanese clinical trial published in 2003 gave perilla extract to patients with seasonal allergies. The treatment group experienced a 50% reduction in symptoms. 50% from a plant that grows like a weed. The active compound, rosmarinic acid, inhibits the enzymes that trigger allergic reactions. A Korean study in 2010 found that patients consuming perilla leaf extract saw a 23% reduction in post-meal blood sugar. I do not make health claims for plants. I grow them, eat them, and read the research. The research on perilla is small in volume compared to pharmaceutical studies. What exists is consistent and credible. The real show began in September when the plants flowered. Small white flower spikes appeared at the top of each plant, unremarkable to look at, easy to miss. I almost deadheaded them, old gardener instinct to prolong the leafy growth. I am glad I did not. Each flower spike, as it matured, began producing seeds. Hundreds of tiny dark seeds in each cluster, falling freely when the spike dried and the wind caught it. I let some plants go to seed naturally and bagged the flower heads of others with small mesh drawstring bags, the kind sold at craft stores for $1, to catch the seeds before they dropped. The bags worked well. I collected roughly 3 cups of seeds from 12 plants. Clean, dry, dark brown, the size of poppy seeds. The number that matters is this. Each perilla plant produces between 1,000 and 4,000 seeds. 85% of those seeds germinate. They remain viable in the soil for 5 years or longer. Plant perilla once, in one good season. The following spring, it returns without permission. The spring after that, it returns again. Korean agricultural records document perilla patches growing on the same land for 10 generations. No replanting, no purchasing new seeds. The crop simply continues. In agricultural terms, this is called naturalization. In practical terms, it is permanent food infrastructure. One decision by one person feeds their garden for decades. This is where my self-seeding experiment delivered results I did not expect. I deliberately let 4 plants drop their seeds in October, marking the spots with small stakes. I covered the area with a thin layer of leaf mulch, not to protect the seeds, but because I mulch everything, and the perilla seeds were on their own. In April, without any action on my part, dense clusters of perilla seedlings appeared at every marked location. Not a few scattered sprouts, hundreds, thick enough to look like grass. The 85% germination rate from the research papers was clearly not a laboratory artifact. It was happening in my raised bed, in soil I had not amended, from seeds I had not collected or stored. I thinned them to 12-inch spacing and had more than I could use. My neighbor Elaine, who grows herbs for the farmer's market, took 30 seedlings and later told me her customers kept asking what the purple-bottomed leaves were. By mid-July, my second-year perilla bed was larger than the first, entirely from free seed that fell on its own. My cost for the second season of Omega-3 production, $0. The oil extraction is the part I expected to be difficult, and was not. I bought a small manual seed press online for $87, a hand-cranked steel device about the size of a meat grinder. Dried the seeds in a food dehydrator for 6 hours at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Fed them into the press a tablespoon at a time. The oil that dripped out was golden green, with a nutty smell that reminded me of toasted sesame. From 3 cups of seeds, I extracted roughly a 1/4 cup of oil. Not much by industrial standards. Enough for daily supplementation, a teaspoon a day, which is the amount several studies used. I stored it in a small amber glass bottle in the refrigerator, the same way any cold-pressed seed oil should be kept. One season's harvest from 12 plants provided approximately a 3-month supply of omega-3 supplementation, from seeds that cost me $6 once. I want to put that in terms my former students would understand, because I have been thinking about this in classroom language. Imagine I stood at the whiteboard and drew 2 columns. Column 1, fish oil, annual cost, $40 times 4 bottles equals $160. Requires industrial fishing, factory processing, gelatin capsules, temperature-controlled shipping, retail markup. Active omega-3 content varies by brand, typically 30 to 50%. Column 2, perilla. First-year cost, $6 for seeds. Every year after that, $0. Requires a garden bed, a hand press, and a glass bottle. Omega-3 content, 64%, consistent across studies. A ninth grader could look at those two columns and tell you which one makes sense. I spent 11 years in column 1 because nobody told me column 2 existed. That is not a failure of intelligence. It is a failure of information flow, and it is structural. Growing perilla requires almost nothing. USDA zones 4 through 10, which cover most of the continental United States and equivalent climates in Europe. Full sun to partial shade, average soil. It does not need amendments or special preparation. 12-inch spacing, though the plants tolerate crowding. Water occasionally during establishment, then leave it alone. After the first season, watering becomes optional. The plant adapts to local rainfall patterns. It tolerates drought once established. It tolerates neglect. It tolerates the kind of benign abandonment that I have learned, after years of over-managing my garden, produces the best results. The plants grow 18 to 36 inches tall, bushy, with large, attractive leaves that make them ornamental enough for a front yard. The kind of plant that earns compliments rather than complaints from neighbors. There is a warning I should include here, because I would have appreciated hearing it before my first season. Perilla is a member of the mint family, and it shares the mint family's enthusiasm for real estate expansion. Allowing every plant to drop every seed means perilla will appear everywhere the following spring, in beds, paths, cracks in the patio, between paving stones. Wonderful for anyone who wants perilla everywhere. Inconvenient for anyone with other plans for those spaces. My approach in the second year was selective. I let 4 plants self-seed in the dedicated herb bed and cut the flower heads off the rest before they matured. Controlled abundance. Enough free plants for next year, not so many that perilla stages a hostile takeover of the tomato bed. My neighbor Elaine was less careful. She now has perilla in her lawn and says she considers it a feature, not a problem. One September evening, after pressing the last batch of seeds, I sat on the back step with a cup of perilla leaf tea and the small amber bottle of fresh oil on the concrete beside me. The garden was dimming. A few late tomatoes hung on the vines, red against the darkening green. The perilla bed behind the shed had already dropped most of its seeds, and I could see the dried flower spikes swaying slightly in the last light. I had a thought that surprised me. 30 years of teaching biology, and the most useful thing I have learned about plants I learned after I retired. Not from a textbook, not from a conference, not from a curriculum committee. From a Korean grandmother's kitchen tradition, passed down through 2,000 years of quiet, practical repetition. The knowledge was never hidden. It was just never translated into the language I happen to speak. The seeds are in the ground now. They will come back in April without my help. That is the part I keep thinking about. Not the omega-3 content, not the research papers, not the economics of the supplement industry. The fact that the plant comes back. Every spring, without being asked, it comes back.